All right, guys, this is just a continuation of your review. Hopefully helpful for you preparing for the interim or even the EOC towards the end of the term. Okay, so this is Unit 6, Progressives, and also small amount of imperialism. All right, so let's get going. So we'll start with the progressive era. So if we remember, coming off of Unit 5, we have quite a bit of corruption, okay? Big business has expanded to a point that isn't right, okay? You have billionaires, but you also have immigrants living in tenements. You have a major wealth gap. You have several societal issues, right? Women still don't have a clear place in society. It's not equal. Big business is out of control. Think about Rockefeller and kind of the control and influence that he has within the government. Okay. Same thing with Carnegie. Really, any monopoly man. They are very much present within American government. And this cartoon is actually a really great example, right? All these monopoly men are huge, right? And that's trying to display the influence that they have over Congress, okay? Now, is that democratic? Absolutely not, okay? So that's one big problem. We also have consumers kind of being taken advantage of, right? Nobody wins in a monopoly. So that is an issue, okay? We have a lot of things that need to be fixed. So that is the progressive era, right? Gilded Age, we introduce problems. Progressive era, we try to solve them. Now, really, before we can begin to solve the problems that we see, we have to be informed of the problems, okay? The public is kind of blissfully unaware of several things. So we need somebody to tell the public what's going on. That is going to be a muckraker, okay? They are going to be investigative journalists who uncover the problems of society, okay? And this could be extremely broad. It could be in business. For example, Ida Tarbell will kind of uncover the problems with big business specifically relating to Rockefeller, right? She will write something called The History of Standard Oil, which targets him and kind of his corrupt business practices, okay? Upton Sinclair will be far more focused on reform for society in general. He will write The Jungle, okay? Now, The Jungle was intended to be focused on immigrant labor and kind of the hardships that they go through in the factory. The problem is he's writing about the meatpacking industry in Chicago, and the people who read this book are kind of latching on to the issues with food production. They will be far more concerned with that, okay? Nevertheless, most of these problems will outrage the public, and the public will demand that the government step in, okay? So for example, we have the Meat Inspection Act that is passed because of Upton Sinclair and the work that he put in, right? That public outrage will eventually lead to change, okay? You also need to know Jacob Riis. He wrote How the Other Half Lives. This will focus on slums in New York, okay? So there will be like housing codes introduced for reform in that area. So essentially, muckraker is somebody who exposes the problems in society, hopefully generates outrage by the public. The public can then pressure the government to make change. Now, you don't have to be a muckraker to promote change during the time period. Okay, you can just be a progressive. And we find that a lot of women are involved in the progressive movement. For example, Jane Addams, perhaps the most important one. Okay, she will establish Hull House in Chicago. Now, Hull House is a social service agency that provides aid for immigrants. Now, this is primarily in the form of education, right? Why don't you come here and have English language learning classes? or simple math and reading classes, okay? Things that can help you be successful in society. Okay, if we remember, all these new immigrants, primarily from Eastern and Southern Europe, are having difficulty transitioning and assimilating into American society. Okay, she did recognize this problem and she will help them with that transition. Now, again, this is not something done by the government. This is something done by a citizen, just a progressive person who saw a need for change. Okay, additionally, they'll just be more involved in politics. Okay, they will start pushing for suffrage. Okay, and we know that they are successful after World War I. The 19th Amendment is passed. Now, kind of going along with that suffrage movement, there is a more broad movement of voting power expansion. Okay, citizens will have more power in what's happening in the government. We talked about a lot of corruption beforehand, so there are going to be several movements to kind of combat that corruption and put power back in the hands of the voters and the citizens. Okay, so that first thing would be an initiative. Okay, taking initiative to get something done. So, for example, you know, when people go around with petitions, hey, could you sign this? I'm really trying to get this on the governor's desk or whatever. Okay, that is an example of taking initiative. Okay, gaining public support to try and force a vote on an issue. Okay, that is initiative. And obviously, that is clear expansion of voting power. And then that power continues to expand when you get to a referendum. A referendum is simply a public vote on an issue where the people decide themselves. Now, this kind of displays mistrust with the government because maybe you don't really trust the government to make the decision that supports the public. You want to make that decision yourself. You decide whether or not a law will be passed. Okay. Several examples of this. I know the one I always use in class is in Oconee County. They held a vote to decide whether or not alcohol should be served on Sundays. Okay, that was up to the citizens of that county. Okay, so again, clear expansion of voting power. Okay, you are making decisions that specifically affect you. And then the last one that truly shows the power of voters now is recall. Now, you see recalls in the news all the time, peanut butter, airbags, even vehicles, as you can see on this slide. Recalls happen all the time. And the reason is the thing was dangerous for public consumption. We've got to take it out, right? Same thing can be determined for a government official. They're dangerous to the public. They're not doing what the public asked them to do. They are not representing the public like they promised to do. So they need to be removed from office. So simply it's a vote to determine whether or not an individual should be removed or recalled. So really combating the issue of corruption that we saw at first. Because if you are corrupt, what's going to happen to you? You will be recalled. All right, kind of shifting gears here onto Jim Crow. Now, as we know, Jim Crow is passed because it's kind of resistance that we see from the South, right? We have all those Reconstruction amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, and the South obviously does not like them, but they must pass them in order to be accepted back into the Union. So they're passed, but do they really work? No, because Jim Crow is passed in response. So it is segregation, okay? We will have separate facilities for white and colored Americans, okay? Now, obviously, you can have separate, but are they necessarily equal? Absolutely not. Okay, the facilities for blacks are extraordinarily inferior. Okay, now the thing that you need to think about is this a violation of the 14th Amendment in which citizens are equal? Yes, it absolutely is. Okay, the problem is Plessy versus Ferguson. So the court case, Plessy versus Ferguson, essentially upholds that Jim Crow is constitutional. It says essentially segregation is okay, all right, as long as they are separate but equal. Now, can you really kind of try the inequality? Not really, not successfully. Okay, so facilities for Black Americans will continue to be inferior. Okay, and so the Supreme Court holding this up is a huge, huge deal. Okay, and we will see segregation continue for quite some time. All right, Booker T. Washington. We'll start with him first. He was from Virginia. Okay, so from the South, very much aware of the difficulties of being Black in the South. Okay, he will kind of focus on racial uplift, but kind of a slower approach. Now, if we remember, he does the slower approach because, again, he's from the South. He knows the dangers of being a bit too radical, especially with the uptick in lynchings at the time. Okay, now he will this racial uplift has to do with education. So he will form the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, focused on Black higher education. Okay, now his biggest thing would be the Atlanta Compromise speech, again, which he says go slow, okay, to avoid harsh white backlash. Now, again, this is criticized mainly because people think he's too accommodating to white interests. Okay, nevertheless, extremely influential figure. Okay, but we'll go on to W.E.B. Du Bois. He was far more focused on attacking Jim Crow now. Okay, now he will also focus on the talented 10%, basically saying the top 10% of Black Americans will be the ones to kind of display superiority, I guess, and promote equality, right? If you can show that there are excellent people within the Black population, this top 10%, then you can show how great the population can be, okay? He will go on to form the NAACP, which we're going to talk about now. So the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was founded by Du Bois and a few other individuals in 1909. It was in response to, again, the uptick in lynchings that we see in the early 1900s. Nevertheless, their goal is to ensure political, educational, social, and economic equality of all people and to eliminate racial hatred and discrimination. Now, they're going to do this primarily through the court system. There's going to be a ton of lawyers within the NAACP, and they will challenge Jim Crow and other laws that are kind of standing in the way of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So that is going to be their primary goal, is to achieve those rights that were promised during the Reconstruction era. All right, this next slide is going to cover quite a bit, so bear with me. We're shifting gears and we're shifting to imperialism. Okay, so America kind of begins to expand its role in world affairs and kind of begins to be a world power. Now, this is unusual because we've kind of engaged in neutrality thanks to George Washington's precedent. Okay, now we have always expanded. Our westward expansion is kind of in our blood, if you will. However, we're done, right? We have gone coast to coast, and so now we're kind of like, well, what is left? Okay, Manifest Destiny has been complete. So what we're going to kind of do is turn our eyes elsewhere. Now, there's a few reasons why we do this. Number one, American industry has grown quite a bit. Okay, we need new sources for raw materials. We need new overseas markets to sell all of our products because, again, we're producing at such a high rate. Okay, so the idea of expanding for that reason is attractive. Now, on top of that, we have kind of this race to colonize the world. We saw that especially well in Africa. Okay, Europeans were colonizing Africa at such a rapid rate. Okay, now America's going to see that, and they're kind of going to want to keep up with other nations, right? We also would like to establish overseas territories. Okay, so we're going to start looking to do that. Now, while we're looking to do that, we're also going to be thinking about our Navy. Now, we've talked about before, those ships need to be able to refuel. So if we're going to send them around the globe, we need kind of spots to do that. And then lastly, the idea of social Darwinism, or the white man's burden. The rest of the world is inferior, okay? And they really need civilized white nations to help them out, to show them the ways of advancement, of Christianity, of democracy, all these things that America believes to be superior at. Okay, so those are the reasons. Now, when do we get a chance to actually do something? Well, Cuba is going to try and declare independence from Spain. Okay, Spain is going to say, wait a second, and they're going to start using brutal tactics to kind of keep Cuba under Spanish control. Now, America will hear about this, but America will kind of go beyond. Okay, we will see the emergence of yellow journalism. Remember, it's yellow because it's impure. It's not necessarily true. It's going to be embellished or exaggerated. Okay, and this is going to get many Americans on board to kind of, oh, we should do something. We should go be the white saviors. So if you recall, we go and we park the USS Maine right off the coast of Cuba. Now we do this, and then mysteriously it explodes. And that is enough for the United States to declare war. Okay. Now the war, pretty quick. It will end within a matter of 6 weeks. And as a result of that, we will free Cuba, granted independence. However, we will take over Puerto Rico and Guam. Now, we will also acquire the Philippines. That is a problem, however, because the Philippines are confused. Why didn't we grant them independence? In the same way that we did Cuba. Now, to be honest, the cause is white man's burden. We are racist. Okay. So nevertheless, we are going to keep them as a U.S. territory, and that will kind of be the start of the Philippine-American War, which will last for 3 years. Okay. So all of this is going to kind of push America to being a world power, to be this expansive force, as you can see through this eagle, kind of spreading its wings over the world and asserting its dominance. Now, it's important to note that not everyone kind of believed in imperialism in America. Okay, we start to see an anti-imperialist sentiment begin to develop around the same time. Okay, and essentially what this means is you don't believe in what America is doing. Okay, you believe it goes against founding principles. For example, democracy. Okay, we did not like being a colony. We didn't like being colonized by the British. Therefore, we rebelled. We declared our independence. Okay, so us turning around and deciding to colonize other nations seems a bit hypocritical. Okay, and so there are people who begin to speak about these issues, and they end up forming the Anti-Imperialist League. So this is simply a group who is against imperialism. Some notable names of these members include William Jennings Bryan and Mark Twain. Okay, so just know that this does exist. There is pushback to imperialism within America. Now, we do need to take some time and focus specifically on America's actions in Latin America. So if you recall from a few units ago, we talk about the Monroe Doctrine. What this is it's simply a warning to Europe. Hey, don't come into the Western Hemisphere. The Western Hemisphere is ours. You have no business recolonizing. Okay, this is kind of our space, and you don't need to be over here. Okay, now did we have the resources then to kind of back this up? Absolutely not. We were kind of just talking. Okay, but now that we are kind of serious as a world power, we are going to add on to that. We are going to add the Roosevelt Corollary. What this is essentially is, hey, we said the Monroe Doctrine, the Roosevelt Corollary is us backing it up. Okay, if you come over here, it's going to go down. Okay, we have a Navy now. We have a pretty good Army now. Okay, don't come in here. Okay, so it is just an addendum to the Monroe Doctrine, saying watch out. Okay, and this is kind of part of Roosevelt's big stick diplomacy. Yes, we're open to negotiation. Yes, we'd love to talk. However, if talks fail, we will use force. Okay, so essentially just much stronger foreign policy than we've ever seen before. Now, additionally, we are kind of expanding into Latin America in our own way. For example, the Panama Canal. Now, originally we went to Colombia to build through there. However, they declined. Okay, they denied us, and then we realized, hey, Panama's having an issue with Colombia. So if we agree to help Panama, they will owe us. Okay, so that's exactly what happened. We helped Panama defeat Colombia, and then they owed us a favor and allowed us to build the Panama Canal through their country. Okay, and what this does is it just allows us to kind of patrol a bit more efficiently in our area. We don't have to go all the way around South America to connect to the West Coast. We have a nice trade route, and we also have new connections in Latin America. All right, so that'll do it for Unit 6. Come see me if you have any other questions.